Number one, submission. Any lack of submission leads to Satan devouring us. Look what it says in verse 5. Likewise, you younger people. Likewise, what is it likewise? It's going back to verses 1 through 4. He starts with the leaders of the church, and he tells the leaders of the church that they are supposed to be the greatest servants in the church. They're supposed to lead, look what it says in verse 4, they're supposed to lead by being, or at the end of verse 3, by being examples to the flock without saying a word. They're supposed to show the compassion of Christ, the humility of Christ, the servanthood of Christ, the purity of Christ. They're supposed to be living examples of Christ. How do they do that? By lining up behind him, by submitting to him. And so likewise, verse 5, even if you're not an elder, you younger people, everybody, why does it say younger? Because the word elder, zakein, meant white-haired. It was primarily older people in the Hebrew culture were elders. They were revered because they were older. So he says, you younger, everybody that's not an elder, you submit yourself to those elders. Yes, all of you, look at this, be submissive to one another. It's not that there's this elite group, you know, the 1/10 of 1% or whatever we hear about in the news all the time. It's not the elites that run the church. It's the greatest servants. It's those that most exemplify Jesus Christ. But all of us, by their example, submit to one another. We don't jockey. We don't fight and claw and selfishly seek our own way. We all say that we want to be followers together of Christ, even as you are. That's why Paul said, be ye followers together of me, even as I also am of Christ. Every believer is supposed to have someone else in their life to say, come on, follow me, I'm following Christ. What the parents you just saw, that's exactly what parenting is. That's why it's so hard. Because those little people are watching us all the time. And they go, boy, you just got, really angry. And they point, and boy, it bothers us when they point out our inconsistencies. We're supposed to be followers together of Christ. And we're supposed to ask other people to follow us following Christ. And that's what all of us submit to. We're all on the same journey, and we're all related to one another. And any lack of submission to the body, to one another, to the elders, and to Christ opens us up to Satan devouring us. Secondly, humility. Not getting dressed leads to Satan having an opening. Just like an unsubmissive, kind of a rebellious. Do you remember what it says in 1 Samuel 15 about this submissiveness? Rebellion is like witchcraft. Unsubmissiveness draws Satan just like the occult does and witchcraft. And so just like that, we are supposed to also have this humility. A submissive person is also usually humble. A proud person doesn't want to submit to anyone. They want to have their own way. They want to be out in front and seen and running everything. And a submissive person is willing to step back and let Christ be seen and clothe himself with humility and transparently let Christ out. And humility is a choice. As I said in Colossians 3, we clothe ourselves with humility. And in verse 5, the second half, it says, be clothed with humility. The same concept. It's like Paul said to the Colossians, that you take off the old garments of the flesh and put on all of the Christ-like, what also is called the fruit of the Spirit. That we have what I like to call a personality transplant. We take our old personality, the way that I am, and allow Christ to put the way that he is upon us. So be clothed with humility. Why? For God resists the proud. Why is it a door open for the devil? Because God is resisting us. God is allowing Satan to buffet us when we are not humble. Have you ever noticed when you're proudly going your own way, it seems like everything goes wrong at times? If you're a believer, it's because God's just dropping things in your way to cause us to be resisted. There was something interesting in the news this week. If you saw the picture, It was a security camera, one of those surveillance ones that are everywhere. And I think it was in California, since most people live in California, and so there's a lot of crime in California because so many people are there. And some bad guy was running madly down the sidewalk, and some policeman was wildly chasing him. And this passerby acted like he wasn't even watching, and just as the bad guy came, he stuck his foot out. And the security camera caught him. And boom, the bad guy whamp right on his face, and the policeman boom right on top of him. And the passerby just walks away, but the camera caught him tripping up the criminal. Did you know that when we don't clothe ourselves with humility, that God is not protecting us, and Satan can just put his foot out and trip us up, and we fall headlong into sin if we don't choose. God will resist us, but he gives grace to the humble. Therefore, verse 6, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and he will exalt you in due time. God says, wait patiently for me. And if you humble yourself, you will have your exaltation. I will let everybody see that the greatest is the one who is the greatest servant, the most humble.